Today we are talking about the must-add players on the waiver wire. I talked about some of these guys in my Week 13 guide video that I posted a couple of days ago, but I have more players on this list, and I'm going to go into more detail as to why you should add them, so let's dive right into it. Number 18 is Morgan Frost of the Philadelphia Flyers, who had a really slow start to the season. Now, we heard what Tortorella said about Frost. He's up and down like a toilet seat, but I think this could finally be his breakout opportunity. He is a young player who has struggled in his 3 seasons in the NHL, but he's on the first line and first line power play, so I think this is finally his opportunity to take seize of the moment and break out. If you watch Frost out there, he has a lot of skill. He just needs to build that confidence, and I think he has finally found it. Torts has said that he's going to keep giving him minutes and opportunity for the rest of the season, so if he continues this play, he could be a really good add in deeper leagues, especially at only 3% rostered. The next player is Michael Rasmussen of the Detroit Red Wings. He only has 17 points in 33 games, but since being moved up to the first line and first line power play, he has 7 points in his last 5 games. Rasmussen is a young guy. He's only 23 years old. He got drafted 9th overall in the 2017 draft, and he hasn't lived up to the potential that people saw in him when he got drafted, but this could be a breakout year for him if he keeps getting this deployment. He's also a peripheral beast if your league counts out. He takes a lot of shots, blocks, and hits. Bertuzzi is going to be back soon, so I don't know if that's going to bump Rasmussen off the first line power play, but either way, if he finds his way into the top 6 consistently, he could put up a lot of points and could be a good long-term add, but for now, I think he's a really good short-term add. The next player on this list is Calle Jarnkrok of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been on fire as of late with 10 points in his last 10 games because he got moved up to the second line playing with Marner and Tavares. Now, it's not a guarantee he stays on this line, but because he's been so productive on the line, I think he could stay. And we've seen guys that have played in that top 6 on the Maple Leafs, such as Michael Bunting, who have had career years. If he stays on this line, I think his roster at only 19% is too low, and it's going to keep going up. We will see what happens, but definitely keep an eye on Jarnkrok because I think there's a lot of potential there. Lawson Crouse, this guy I think is super underrated. He has 22 points and 14 goals in 35 games, which puts him on an 82 game pace of 51 points and 32 goals. And this isn't new for Crouse, guys. He had 20 goals in 65 games last season, which would have put him on pace for 25 goals in a full season. That is pretty good on an Arizona Coyotes team that is not so good. Even though his shooting percentage is high at 20.9%, it also was high last year, so maybe some regression expected here, but he's in the top 6, he gets some decent power play time, and he's also a peripheral beast. If your league counts hits and blocks, I think he is a must-add in any leagues with 12 teams or more. Number 12 on this list is Ryan Hartman of the Minnesota Wild. I think this guy has a ton of potential, but it's contingent on one thing, and that one thing is getting back on that first line with Mats Zuccarello and Kirill Kaprizov. When he was on this line last year, he put up 34 goals and 65 points in 82 games, a career year for Hartman, who has been pretty much a bottom 6 forward for his entire career in the NHL. He just came back from injury, and he has 9 points in 15 games, and also 4 goals. And this is not playing on a line with Kaprizov at all. In my league that decently values hit shots and blocks, he was season rank 58. I think he has so much potential. At only 31% rostered, this is a massive steal. You may not have to add him just yet, but keep an eye on him because if he does find himself on that first line again, I think he can put up similar numbers. Number 11, Phillip Danault of the Los Angeles Kings. He has been extremely solid this year with 29 points in 41 games and also 12 goals. That second line on the Kings has been on absolute fire as of late. He has 9 points in his last 8 games. His shooting percentage is 15%, which is sustainable. And he also puts up really good peripherals too if your league counts those. Danault had a career year last year. He put up 27 goals in 79 games, also 51 points. That is really solid. He's not going to put up a monster stat line, but he's going to give you consistent points day in and day out. He gets decent power play time as well, and I just think he's a solid option moving forward. So if you need a center, definitely take a look at him. Number 10, a guy that's playing on a line with Phillip Danault. That line that I told you has been on fire lately. That man is Viktor Arvidsson of the Los Angeles Kings. He has 30 points in 37 games, which is extremely solid, putting him on pace for 66 points and 22 goals in a full healthy 82 game season. He's on a similar pace to last year where he put up 20 goals and 49 points in 66 games, so I think 29% rostered is far too low, especially with left wing and right wing eligibility and the fact that he takes a lot of shots as well. I think in general he's an all-around solid player and could be a long-term add on a Kings team that can score a lot of goals. Number 9 is Nick Schmaltz. Schmaltz has been amazing this year, guys. 17 points in 20 games, and also 7 goals. This would put him on pace for 69 points and 28 goals in an 82 game season. And you might be thinking, hey, this is a small sample size, I don't think he can put up these type of points. But then you look at his stats last year and he is on pace for a similar season. Last year he had 59 points in 63 games, also 23 goals. The fact that he was on pace for over 70 points last year and 70 points this year, and he's only 21% rostered, is mind-boggling to me. He's playing on the first line, he's playing on the first line power play, he puts up a lot of points, and I think with any leagues with 10 teams or more, he needs to be rostered. This is why he is likely the biggest sleeper on this list. Number 8 is goaltender Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen of the Buffalo Sabres. And you might be looking at his stats right now and thinking, is this a must-have player? 3.39 goals against average, .894 save percentage isn't the greatest, but he's 8-3-1. He's on a 5-game winning streak, beating teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, the Boston Bruins, the Colorado Avalanche, the Washington Capitals, and he has a .921 save percentage through this stretch. Now, there's one caveat here, and I do want to tell you guys there is a lot of risk in adding Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen for the long term if you're going to drop a guy that is more consistent and that is more reliable, and that is because there is a chance he gets sent back down to the AHL, where he was most of the season. Goalie Eric Comrie is returning soon, and for most of the season it was Eric Comrie and Craig Anderson splitting starts. Comrie hasn't really been that good. In fact, I'm pretty sure his stats are the worst of the 3 Buffalo goalies, so maybe they send Comrie down. I am not entirely sure. I can't predict the future. If he is the number 1 starting goalie on Buffalo, then this could be massive. I know the Sabres let in a lot of goals against, but they do win games too. And they also let a lot of shots against. So that means wins and a lot of saves. When Comrie comes back, you can get a better idea of what the Sabres are going to do moving forward. But for now, if you want to make a long-term speculative ad for short-term benefits, Luukkonen is a very good option. Number 7 is Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals. I've talked about this guy in many of my previous videos, and I think he's a really good option, especially if your league counts hits. That's where the real value comes with Tom Wilson. He had 240 hits last season, and he also put up a career number of points with 52 points in 78 games and also 24 goals. He's coming back from an ACL surgery, and I don't know the history of ACL surgeries in the NHL. I don't know if it's going to affect his play, but if he plays anything like he did last year, this is a really good long-term hold. He's slated to come back in the next week or two. He was skating on a line of practice with Nicholas Backstrom and Alexander Ovechkin, so obviously a lot of potential. If he can find his way on the first line power play, that would be even more massive. So overall, I would suggest stashing him on your IR if you have an IR spot available, or adding him and wasting a roster spot for a week or two until he comes back. Hopefully when he comes back, he can play well. I hope that he does. Number 6 is Minnesota goaltender Filip Gustavsson. He's been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL in the past month, with a goals against average of 1.74 and second in save percentage at .936 since November 19th. Overall, he has a record of 8-5-1 with a goals against average of 2.34 and a save percentage of .920. Absolutely incredible numbers. Lately, he's been splitting starts with Marc-Andre Fleury, and he's been outperforming Fleury by a decent amount. Now, Fleury hasn't been terrible, but he has a goals against average of 2.82 and a save percentage of .904. So if you compare them to Gustafsson's stats, Gustafsson has clearly been the better goalie. But overall, him taking over the starters crease is contingent on a number of different variables, so I'm not going to tell you to add him to be your number 1 goaltender. However, I do think he's a really good short-term option with the way that he's been playing. Splitting starts with Fleury is still going to get you a lot of points in any given week. I think you need to keep an eye on him and see how that goalie situation is playing out, because there is a lot of potential. Number 5 is Brandon Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and not to brag, but I have been talking about how good this guy is since my last must-add video a couple of weeks ago when he was only 23% rostered. Now it is 55%. People are starting to finally catch on. He has 30 points in 36 games, also 15 goals. This would put him on pace for 68 points and 34 goals in an 82 game season, which is absolutely incredible. His shooting percentage is a little bit high at 19.7%, so there may be some regression, but the fact is he's on the first line on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he's also on the first line power play on the Tampa Bay Lightning. The reason I think that his production is sustainable is because last year he had 25 goals in 77 games between the Blackhawks and the Lightning, but mostly on the Chicago Blackhawks. He's 24 years old, and I think this is just a young player that is breaking out. 55% rostered is still too low in my eyes, so if you are on the fence about adding Hagel, I think you should should go ahead and do it. Lots of potential being on the Tampa Bay Lightning, one of the best offensive teams in the league, and Hagel is certainly going to produce a lot of points on that first line and on that first line power play. Number 4 is defenseman Erik Gustafsson on the Washington Capitals, and I was lucky enough to add him in my 14-team league, a league in which I really desperately needed a defenseman, and he has been super clutch as of late with 13 points in his last 8 games. He has 23 points in 39 games along with 6 goals, putting him on pace for 48 points and 12 goals in an 82-game season. And the reason why there is so much potential with Gustafsson is that John Carlson unfortunately sustained that putt to the face, and he's going to be out for a couple of months, potentially the rest of the regular season. This means that Gustafsson is going to be on that first pairing and on that first line power play, the go-to offensive defenseman on the Washington Capitals, a team that has been so hot as of late. We've seen the type of points that he can put up with his deployment, so if that is any indication of what is to come, I am super excited. If you are looking for a defenseman, I think Gustafsson is the number 1 defender to add. Number 3 is Los Angeles Kings goaltender Pheonix Copley. The Kings have been so desperate for a starting goaltender this year, and it appears that they have found their guy. He is 9-1. He has won 7 games in a row. His goals against average and his save percentage is nothing to go crazy about. It's not outstanding, but at 2.52 and .908, that is extremely solid. Jonathan Quick is out of his prime now. He has not played good at all this year, so I do think that Copley is their number 1 best option at the moment. Unless they trade for a goalie before the trade deadline, he is going to be their starting goalie. And what that means is a lot of fantasy points for your fantasy team. If you have a struggling goalie like Jack Campbell, Sergei Bobrovsky, a few of these other guys that have been underperforming, like through 40 games now, we have a pretty good sample size, then you might want to drop them for Pheonix Copley at this point. Number 2 is Max Pacioretty of the Carolina Hurricanes, and I've talked about this guy a ton in my previous videos, and maybe I'm a little biased because I drafted him in both of my leagues, but I really do think there is a ton of potential with Pacioretty, and 53% rostered is way too low. You might be worried about his torn Achilles tendon recovery, you might be worried about him being 34 years old, maybe he's out of his prime, but I am not worried about that at all. He has been shown to heal quickly from his injuries and come back playing really good. We saw it on Vegas. He had 37 points in 39 games last year with 19 goals, putting him on pace for 40 goals in a full healthy 82-game season. Along with these points and goals, if your league values peripherals, Pacioretty is extremely valuable. He takes an insane amount of shots. He had 148 shots in 39 games, so he's going to take 3 to 4 shots per game. He also puts up some hits and blocks too. He likes to put his body on the line for his team. So I just think in general, on a Hurricanes team that is one of the best teams in the league, he is going to put up a lot of fantasy points. If he is somehow still on your waiver wire, you need to add him before it's too late. It's simple as that. The final player on this list, number 1, is Travis Konecny of the Philadelphia Flyers. He was on my last must-add player video. I think he was number 3, and he has certainly moved up. Look at his stats. 37 points in 32 games, and also 19 goals in these 32 games, putting him on pace in an 82-game season. 94 points and 42 goals. This would be a career year for Konecny, coming off a really poor season with 38 points in 79 games and only 13 goals. His shooting percentage last year was something like 8%, and this year it is 18.4. So I do expect his goal scoring to come down a little bit. I really do think he's going to be an 80-point player this season and continue this type of production. It seems like Tortorella has unlocked something in Konecny, and I look forward to seeing how he progresses through the rest of the season. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below and also that like button. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season, so I would really appreciate it. And like always, have a good one.